I may just clean the floor, but I also scrub away your deceit. I never thought I'd be invited to the top floor of the company. Actually, invited isn't the right word. I was never allowed up there. That floor wasn't for people like me. It was for those who wore spotless white shirts and held the coffee cups I washed every morning, still smelling of mint and arrogance. That day, I still had my pale green apron on, a cloth in hand, wiping down the meeting room table, trying not to get in anyone's way. The room was packed: shareholders, family members of the Fan family, lawyers, employees, all hiding behind polished faces but with eyes full of worry. On the screen was the contract for the Fangia Central Building, a property worth billions of dong. The lawyer was missing. No one knew why. Mr. Fan Tung, the eldest son, slammed his phone down after several unanswered calls. His jaw tightened. He ran away. So now what? Who's going to defend us? Standing by the door was Auntie Man, the longtime housekeeper, signaling for me to step back. But I didn't. I looked at the screen, at those faces so sure of their own power, and then at that contract, the one I had secretly read, word by word, 2 months ago. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the way Mr. Tung looked at me, that cold, dismissive glance, as if I were the mop in the corner. I spoke up. If no one else can speak, then, may I say something? The whole room froze. Someone snickered. A woman in a blue dress whispered, "She's the cleaning girl from the ground floor." Fan Tung chuckled, not kindly. "I'm stressed enough as it is. You think this is funny? Clean the floor before you start making speeches. Okay." My heart was pounding, but my voice didn't shake. I used to be a third-year law student at Vietnam National University. I said quietly, "I dropped out when my father died in an accident. My mother fell into debt. I had to work, but I never stopped learning." The room fell silent again. Only the click of a pen and a shallow breath from the opposing lawyer broke the stillness. "That contract," I continued, "is wrong. I know because I cleaned your legal office last week. I found 2 versions of the same document in the waste bin, same date, same number, but only one has the real stamp." A man stood up sharply. "You're admitting to stealing company documents?" I looked him dead in the eye. "I didn't steal, I picked up trash, but the truth shouldn't be thrown away." The air thickened. Fan Tung stared at me like I'd just grown horns. "Who do you think you are?" I took a slow breath. "Someone who still reads every line of what you call trash. And maybe, the only one here who gains nothing from lying." Auntie Man stepped closer and put her hand on my shoulder. "If they won't listen, don't speak," she whispered, "but if you're right, stand your ground." And in that moment, I knew, my life was about to change. Either I'd be fired before sunset, or they'd finally have to see me. What I didn't know was that my reckless words would start a war, one that would make a cleaning girl from the countryside the center of a billion-dong courtroom. But who said people like me aren't allowed to stand in that room? I started working at Fangia Company when I was 23. At first, I just wanted to earn enough to send money home for my mother to pay off debts. I never imagined this job, cleaning offices, wiping glasses, mopping floors, would become a secret door leading me back to the world I once dreamed of, the world of law and justice. Every night, after everyone left, I'd go upstairs to clean the meeting room, still smelling of expensive perfume and ambition. While wiping the tables, I'd glance at the forgotten contracts. At first, it was curiosity. Then I realized something terrifying: people could turn black into white, just by changing a few words. One night, I froze mid-sweep, reading a contract that slashed workers' bonuses by half. My hands trembled. How could people sign something so unfair without blinking? Back in my tiny rented room, barely big enough for a bed and my apron, I covered the wall with handwritten copies of legal articles. Red ink underlined labor rights and employee protection clauses. Sometimes, I cried as I studied, not because it was hard, but because I saw myself in those lines. Auntie Man was the only one who knew. One night, she found me awake at 2 a.m., studying by a dim light. She handed me a cup of warm milk. "Why study again, child? People like us, even if we know the law, they still won't listen." I smiled, my voice hoarse. "I don't study so they'll listen. I study so when they step on me, I know exactly what they're stepping on." She was silent for a long time, then nodded. From that night on, whenever I worked late, she'd quietly leave a loaf of bread and a cup of tea for me, a silent promise, don't give up. 2 months later, I found a forgotten folder in the legal office. Inside were crumpled pages, and a copy of the contract with mismatched signatures and seals. I knew something was wrong, but I couldn't tell anyone. I secretly copied it, hiding it among my old textbooks. By day, I was a janitor. By night, I was a law student again. I listened to old lectures online, reviewed sample verdicts, and marked every suspicious line in those files. The more I read, the colder I felt. This wasn't carelessness, it was a design, deliberate, calculated, cruel. The powerful were playing chess, and people like us were just pawns meant to be sacrificed quietly. I once thought staying silent would keep me safe, but when I saw them preparing to sell off the very building built by workers' sweat, I knew silence was a sin too. I had no money, no title, but I had what they didn't: time, conviction, and a memory that forgot nothing. And then came that day, the day I stood up in the meeting room, hands still smelling of floor cleaner. They laughed, I knew they would. But they didn't know, I'd been preparing for that moment for 3 years, in silence. That courtroom was packed, every seat was taken, lawyers in stiff suits adjusted their collars. The Fan family sat stone-faced in the front row. And me, I wore a plain white shirt. No makeup, no nameplate, just a folder, warm but firm in my hands. As I walked in, I heard them whisper, "Is that the cleaning girl? What is she doing on the defense bench?" I heard them all, but I didn't flinch. I looked up at the judge, an older man with calm, discerning eyes. "Miss Trin Harmai, representing the defendant, please proceed." I stood, my heart pounding like a war drum, but my voice came out steady. "Your Honor, I will present 3 key points. First, the contract presented by the plaintiff is legally invalid. Second, there are signs of signature and stamp forgery. Third, I submit evidence of attempted asset seizure by certain individuals connected to the plaintiff." A wave of murmurs swept through the room. The plaintiff's side rose in protest. "Objection, she is not a licensed attorney. She's just cleaning staff." I turned to them. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't fight. I simply laid down the notarized documents, confirming 2 different versions of the same contract, same date, same reference number, but different stamps. One real, one altered. The judge reviewed the papers. The opposing lawyer squinted. I went on. "I also submit an internal voice recording that reveals a pre-discussion to edit the contract, recovered from a recorder left behind in the top floor boardroom. I found it while cleaning." Silence. Faces blanched. Fan Tung, who once scoffed, "You're just a mop girl. What do you know about law?" sat frozen. The judge finally looked up. "Do you have any proof of authenticity?" "I do," I said, "verified by an independent legal office. All data is here and available for forensic review." No one spoke. Then, quietly, someone clapped. A brief, cautious sound. It was shushed, but a second person nodded in silent agreement. That moment, I knew, I had made them listen. Not because I shouted, but because I brought the truth. As I returned to my seat, Fan Tung leaned in, voice barely above a breath. "I was wrong. I didn't see who you were." I didn't answer. I just gripped the folder tighter. They once thought I was just a cleaner. But today, I was the one cleaning the dirt off their lies. After that court session, the media exploded. Cleaning lady silences the court. Housekeeper exposes billion-dollar fraud. I didn't read all those articles. I was afraid that the spotlight would blind me from the reason I began. I only wanted the truth to be heard. Fan Jia won the case. The court declared the contract invalid and ordered an investigation into document forgery. But for me, victory wasn't in the verdict, it was in the moment. A young accountant, still wearing her wrinkled uniform, ran up to me outside the courthouse. "Thank you, Chi. Turns out, people like us can stand up too." I smiled, saying nothing. A few days later, I was summoned to the conference room, not to clean this time. Fan Tung was there, no tie, no arrogance, just a man in a white shirt, looking at me over a cup of cold coffee. "I've reviewed everything," he said. "Without you, We'd have lost everything. Not you, I said softly. Everyone, the workers, the guards, the cleaners, they built this company. But no one ever defended them. He was silent for a long moment. I want you to stay. Not as a cleaner, as our internal legal advisor. I smiled, shook my head. I don't need a title. I just want you to create a fund, call it, the Justice from the Heart Fund, to help mistreated workers get legal help. He looked at me differently then. No arrogance, only respect. Agreed, he said. News broke that the former lawyer was arrested, bribed by the opposing side. Using fake seals for asset transfer. The same man who once mocked me, saying, "A country girl like you doesn't belong in a courtroom." Now, he walked into one again, in handcuffs. As for me, I still lived in that same small room, my apron hanging by the door. But each night, I felt a new kind of peace, like after years of scrubbing. I'd finally cleaned the last layer of dust off my own dignity. One evening, Auntie Man stopped by, carrying a bag of bread. "They say you're going to be on TV," she smiled. I set down my tea. "I just want silence. If people truly listen, silence is enough." She nodded. "Yes, but your silence, child, makes others wake up." 1 year after the trial that shook the city, I stood in front of a modest 2-story house nestled deep in an alley of Tay Ho district. On the wooden sign hung above the door were hand-carved words. Trin Ha My Community Law Office, free legal aid for workers. There were no glass offices, no tailored suits, just me, still in a plain white shirt, holding a cup of iced tea, and looking straight at the people I once was, voiceless, powerless. On our first morning, an old motorbike driver walked in. He'd been fired for losing a delivery he never received. The next day came a factory worker forced to sign an unpaid resignation. One by one, cases arrived, and one by one, voices were heard. No one called me lawyer. I didn't need him to. I just needed him to know, here, they would not be dismissed. One afternoon, as I was reviewing files, a young girl walked in. Her eyes were red, hands trembling as she clutched a small notebook. "I work at a garment workshop. I saw them secretly change the wage charts. When I spoke up, they threatened to fire me. I don't know what to do." I took her notebook, flipped through a few pages, then looked up. "You did the right thing coming here. You're not alone." She broke down. I placed a hand on her shoulder and spoke the same words I once told myself. "They think we don't know anything. But we do, and we have the right to speak." That night, back in my old attic room, the desk lamp still glowed warm. My apron still hung by the window. But now, on the desk, lay a new folder with a blue cover. Whistleblower Protection Bill, draft from field cases. I opened my laptop. Began typing. Outside, the rain tapped gently on the roof. I no longer feared the rain like I did in the beginning. Because now, I know, after every downpour, comes a chance to begin again. With a name they'll never forget. Ha Mai, the cleaner who scrubbed injustice from an entire system. In life, there are those who quietly walk through layers of prejudice, enduring condescending glances and cutting words, simply because they lack status or a fancy title. But as the old saying goes, real gold fears no fire. The true worth of a person isn't defined by where they start, but by how they choose to move forward, even if their first steps are on dusty, uneven ground. Ha Mai's story is not just about a cleaning woman daring to speak up amidst a room full of power and doubt. It is a gentle reminder to all of us, silence in the face of injustice can become complicity. In a society where the voices of the marginalized are often overlooked or dismissed, even the smallest act of speaking up is an act of courage that deserves to be honored. We don't need to become heroes in the eyes of others. It is enough to live with integrity, stay kind, and have the courage to face what's wrong. Because as our ancestors said, you reap what you sow, kindness and truth will return to you. Even if it takes time. If this story made you reflect, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever witnessed or experienced injustice in your own life? Don't hesitate to share it. Your story might give someone else the strength to keep going. And if this message resonates with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future stories, real, raw, and rich with meaning. Wishing you a peaceful day. No matter how chaotic the world gets, may you carry quiet strength in your heart, just like Harm I once did. Yellow Heart.